as you can all see, we have a special guest today. Her name is Hannah Thorpe, and she works at an agency. She's managing director of the agency Verkeer, um, which is a digital marketing agency, and she has over 8 years of experience having designed and managed a range of successful online campaigns, specializing in combining technology, technical SEO tactics, and content marketing delivery. She's responsible for leading complex technical strategies. And in between leading that agency and driving positive ROI for her clients, she's preparing her talk for YoastCon. We're super happy to have you on the stage there as well, Hannah. But first, welcome to the SEO News webinar.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me.
Today we're going to discuss, the usual bit of Google news, bit of Bing news, some WordPress news, some social media stuff, some industry stuff, some Yoast stuff. We're going to have a brief bit of a chat around SEO strategy and some of your thoughts on audience data and research and maybe surveying and other stuff and where you get all this from and what you do with it. And then we'll take some Q&A from the audience. As Ninka says, please, if you have questions, use the things, click the buttons, ask them in there, upvote each other's stuff, and then the most interesting stuff will rise to the top. That's pretty cool. Excellent. Everyone can definitely see. Everyone can definitely hear. This is a wonderful success. Okay, so let's blitz through some bits. Briefly, if you want to do any deeper digging on the stuff we talk about today, you want to learn more, you missed the link in the chat, you can go to this URL, yoa.st/webinar-jan23. That has all the information, all the links, all the articles that we're going to be talking about, and a bunch of other stuff as well. It's a great resource to kind of get an overview of what we talked about and dive deeper. And if you find yourself lost or confused, or maybe both, we're using acronyms, we're discussing stuff you don't know anything about, we've dived too deep too fast, you can go and take a look at Yoast SEO Academy, which is a really great entry-level stuff for the basics, as well as a whole bunch of more advanced stuff that you can dig through at your own pace. At your own pace. That's a weird thing to say, isn't it? At your own pace. And then lastly, before we get to the news, very, very, very exciting. On May 11th in Nijmegen, which is in the Netherlands, if you're not aware, we will be hosting, drumroll, 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 YoastCon 2023. YoastCon is our SEO conference. It is the best SEO conference because we have all sorts of awesome speakers like Hannah Thorpe. That's a coincidence, isn't it? And a bunch of other people, various rock stars, various experts. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff. There's a bunch of workshops. There's a whole bunch of learning and networking and SEO training and a whole bunch of other awesome stuff. It really is a fantastic event. We would love to see you there. Take a look at the link. Get signed up. Get your tickets in soon. Very, very cool. Look at Taco shouting in chat. Lovely. Cool. Okay, on to the news. So, as ever, we'll go through these. I'll summarize a bit. We'll talk to Hannah about what we think it means. We'll get a feeling for where there might be some practical stuff we can do with it, and we'll blitz through all of these. Apologies in advance. A lot of today's news is kind of AI content, ChatGPT-ish. It is almost all of the news there is at the moment. It's what everybody's talking about. It's where everything's happening. It is quite early. There is not a lot of practical stuff we can do with it. We have touched on some of this, but it is so overwhelmingly the topic at the moment that it's drowning everything else out. But there's still some good stuff to look at. So, not least of which is I presume by this point everybody is familiar with ChatGPT, which is like the latest fancy OpenAI thing, and you type stuff into it and it generates text, and it's incredible. It's not perfect, but it is incredible. And in reaction to that, Google seems to be panicking. They have literally announced a code red situation internally. They've fired 12,000 people. They've announced that they're changing strategic direction. They have reintroduced Larry Page and Sergey Brin as consultants to tell them what to do about AI. They're planning on launching a bunch of products. They're thinking about bringing live chat type AI stuff into the search results. This feels like a profound U-turn, right? We know they've been investing a lot in AI type stuff, but this is, have they been sideswiped by this? And like, what are the implications? What happens next?
I guess, like, to jump in here, my opinion on all AI and all ChatGPT and all of this is that it's just a tactic to get to the end result. So for me, like, Google's always been there to try and answer the questions of users as quickly, really, as it can. And it does that whole, we know what the user wants before they search. kind of thing. Well, maybe they've just seen another mechanism that is a quicker way to get there. And actually, I think seeing it as a complete U-turn is kind of wrong, because that would imply they're going in a different direction. They've just basically jumped out the go-kart and jumped into a sports car. Like, they're taking the way to do it. So I think seeing it in that way makes it a little bit less scary. It explains the job layoffs. Like, those people weren't replaced by AI, which is what I see a lot of the headlines. Those people just aren't AI specialists, so they can't fulfill the tactic that Google needs to meet that objective. And I think seeing it like that kind of will tone everyone down a little bit about the robot revolution.
Nice, makes sense. I think there's two interesting things that stick out with me on this, which are two unanswered problems, which I'm really fascinated by. One is most of Google's revenue comes from people seeing adverts whilst searching and clicking on those. And if a chatbot type thing just answers my story, how do they monetize that? I don't know if they know. And the other is, so all of the content and intelligence that this system has is the product of the content that websites and business owners publish on the web, that it then consumes and deconstructs and reconstructs. But if we remove the role of websites and publishing from that relationship, where is the incentive for people to produce content? Where does this thing get new content and information from? How does the money flow around any of this? And we've seen flavors of these questions leading up to this, but I don't think they have an answer yet. And that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think we're just moving a little bit more towards like time well spent online. So if you think about it, like, for me, searching for something I need an answer for isn't time well spent. I just want the immediate answer. So a system like a chatbot that can give me that answer is great. But time well spent might be like, if I decide I really enjoy reading about the latest things to do in Amsterdam and I want to spend a bit more time researching, you might really enjoy that planning process and want to absorb the content. And I feel like this shift in search, we always used to talk about Google becoming a discovery engine or an answer engine, just pushing content out to us. It splits that in two threads. You've got content being pushed out to you that is fascinating because you enjoy reading it and enjoy absorbing it. And then you've got, here's my functional direct answers. And actually it splits search into two in that way, which I think is a really exciting challenge for brands to be part of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it maybe makes the whole branding and content side of SEO easier, because no longer do you have to produce 100 pages of content that, yes, align to your keyword brief and your market, but really don't add any value, right? They're not having an opinion. They are not adding new information or layer or depth to existing stuff out there. They're just a binary yes or no factual answer to a query. Those kinds of content pages and that kind of information completely commoditized now. So all of your effort maybe wants to go to, maybe not all of it, but certainly proportionally more to differentiated content, ideas, opinions, new and breaking stuff, things that aren't just an answer to a question, stuff where there's complexity and nuance and you really want an expert to explore it.
Yeah, I think there's a site that actually I love in terms of content and the way it produces it. I'm assuming you have it in the US as well. It seems American. I can see a lot of people from the US in the chat. So it's called Beauty Bay. And they actually they do really heavily branded content that someone who's passionate about skincare and makeup would spend lots and lots of time reading, and you'd become loyal through that. But like answering a question like, what foundation should I get or what moisturizer, it's just hard, cold facts. And actually splitting the content in that way works really well for this tactic. They don't care who you get the information about what ingredients you should have in a moisturizer. They care that you then get into their brand and you absorb the stuff and you become a kind of like brand ambassador almost for them. And actually, I think that just makes it a more fun challenge for us to kind of produce content like that.
Yeah, and it becomes about building those relationships and winning hearts and minds rather than just how do I rank for this keyword for this question that people have. Tricky. Cool. Okay, so in line with that, obviously everybody is rushing to the gates to start to go, can I automatically generate all of my content? Can I scale my SEO? Oh dear. And Google have a stance on that, right?
I mean, apparently so. Google, officially, it's like, don't do it. It's a bad idea. But I mean, you're ranking it. So how bad an idea really is it? Because from my perspective, we've seen AI content rank as high and if not better in some cases as non-AI content. So does it matter? as long as your content is answering the question, is factually right, and is in the format the user wants? Probably not.
Indeed, right. And in fact, I saw some really interesting research from Kevin Indig saying he'd analysed a couple of hundred sites, I think, and looked at how does AI-generated stuff compare to human-generated stuff. And he said, in some cases, it's really bad when it's trying to solve the wrong problem. But when it's reviewed and edited, when the domain is reputable, or the brand, and when it's designed to answer specific questions that don't have that nuance and require that expertise, does absolutely fine. So it's like a tool for filling and solving basic problem stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And as a tool for helping you fill out a page a bit and start with something other than a blank canvas, great. Maybe you can rank with that a bit. Doesn't really matter whether a machine wrote it or a human wrote it. Humans are just flesh machines, right? There's not a huge difference. We deconstruct and reconstruct the information. We can see them and turn it into something else. Yeah, as long as you're not going, I'm going to generate 1,000 pages and then just publish them, then yeah, use the tools.
Yeah, and I think as well, like if you're using the tools and you just use them better, that's terrible advice, I realize, but like we've been testing ChatGPT at work, and what we found as an agency is some people get really good results from it and others less so. And I think there's definitely a path for getting trained on how to write a really good brief and how to write a really good request from ChatGPT and what parameters you put in, and actually learning to use that technology is going to really help you in actually producing much better content and getting more out of the AI. If you give it a terrible brief, shockingly, you'll get an absolutely terrible result. There's someone that's just put in the chat about like assemble a variety of subtopics in an article and it needs editing. 100%. So when we're using it, we focus on like writing each section and then putting the sections together. We don't let it write really long articles because it just kind of struggles. And I think, yeah, exactly. Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, for sure. Nice. Cool. Okay. Other Google stuff. This happens periodically, but this one's big. There is a huge new antitrust case been brought against Google from a whole bunch of US states, including the Texas Attorney General, who is on I'm not taking sides, but is on a rampage against Google. And the general angle is they want to break up Google into multiple smaller companies, and in particular, reduce the amount of power that the Google ad ecosystem has over the web. And there's all sorts of allegations around monopolization and all sorts of technical nuance. If you read Google's rebuttals to these, they say you haven't really understood how the technology works. It's not monopoly. You could play this either side, but the point is, this is going to shake up the ad space. If Google gets broken up, even if that's only lip service and it doesn't meaningfully change anything behind the scenes, it will affect how people spend, it will affect how markets and ads perform, and all of that will trickle down to have a huge impact on SEO. I think ads will become more expensive because it's going to be harder to target. It will be harder to take advantage of retargeting across Google, etc. All of this will make SEO look much more appealing. Might be good for you, might mean your competitors take it more seriously. Tricky, we'll see.
I'd also just yeah, I'd say if you actually read the like terminology that's in the case, they actually aren't asking for Google to be broken up. That's like the journalist's take on it, which is absolutely fascinating. I think that journalists see it as break up the monopoly, but actually the wording is it's something like an equitable counteraction. So actually, what they're saying is if you made everything cheaper and in spaces where you had that much dominance, you made that cost effective, you have a chance that Google comes up with a solution that isn't break everything up and that instead is here's a new way of looking at advertising. And I think that's probably the scariest thing from an SEO perspective. If they find a way to make it cost efficient and not a monopoly, then it puts SEO really at risk if we don't go down the route where everything becomes more expensive.
Yeah, very interesting. Definitely worth keeping an eye on and seeing where that trickles down to. Okay, so some Bing news. Everybody's second favorite search. Now, I guess YouTube is my second favorite search engine. Where does Bing rank in your top 10, Hannah?
I mean, it's in the top 10, but probably because I don't know more than 10 search engines. I'd put it maybe.
Okay. What's third? Who's behind? You haven't thought this through at all.
Don't know. I had a client ask me about DuckDuckGo the other day, and I've just got a soft spot for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. A solid fourth for Bing. I love it. Well, maybe that will change because, hey, talking like Bing's continual strategy appears to be 2 steps behind Google. And in that spirit, they too are committed to launching some chat API live assistant type thing within the next couple of months, according to various sources. And speculatively, that's going to be some kind of live chat Q&A assistant. And again, all the same thinking applies. How does search work if it's no longer search, if it's chat? How does monetization work? Why should I publish content? There are no answers to any of these questions, but maybe some entrepreneurial, clever people will work out how they get ahead of that game. I think there's something to be said about producing content that feeds these systems. They're going to have to consume words and learn concepts and check prices and do other stuff from somewhere. And if you can influence that, then maybe you bias it towards your brand. That's a bit vague at this stage, I guess. Hey, Bing, who knew?
Yeah, who knew?
Okay, so some WordPress stuff, equally exciting. So it's that time of year. Obviously, WordPress has some big updates a few times a year, and we get new features and upgrades. We just had 6.1 recently, which you should definitely upgrade to because it speeds your website the heck up. Really, really nice. But occasionally there's a kind of more zoomed out moment where we look at what's the bigger picture, where we're going. And the answer to that is more Gutenberg, more blocks, more evolution of the block editor into the full site editor, including maybe collaborative editing and some other bits and pieces, which is a lovely idea. I don't know how realistic it is that we get it anytime soon, but that continuing to evolve will be great. More community stuff. If you didn't know, Yoast, the company, is the second largest contributor to WordPress, the software, beaten only by Automatic, who kind of sort of own it, depending on how you define that. We spend a huge amount of time and energy working on WordPress, the software, as well as Yoast SEO, the software, as well as attending and sponsoring events and teaching and educating, etc. Why do I mention this? Because we need more other people to do that. We would love other people to be huge. We would love to be the 10th biggest. And because it's open source and because it's kind of everybody's contribution is valuable, we would love to see more people training, educating, writing, designing, coding, fixing, communicating, marketing, leading, all those types of good things. And at the moment, there isn't a huge amount of that. There is a big push to kind of get more people into that community and contributing so that we can make this thing better for everybody. And then more stuff in the kind of WordPress ecosystem. There's some new toys and cutting edge stuff like the ability to build and launch and run an entire WordPress site purely within your browser. No backend databases, no systems, all done on the fly. Pretty cool. So there's a bunch of cool stuff coming in the pipeline. But the big thing here for me is if you can spend a little bit of time now and then and a little bit of resource investing back into the project. We need people who can spot typos in documentation, people who can have opinions on color schemes, people who can train and educate, not just developers. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Social media time. This continues to baffle me how unstable this is, right? We've talked on a few of these shows about the astronomical rise of TikTok and more broadly the rise of short form video as a format and how increasingly that's changing how people discover content and form relationships with brands and how you need to be there, yada, yada, yada. Yet on the other side of this, TikTok may any minute now become illegal in half of the world, and Twitter is hemorrhaging cash, and Elon Musk's leadership of it continues to be baffling from the outside in. Tomorrow, these platforms might no longer exist. Tomorrow, they might be double the size. Tomorrow, there might be new ones. As social and SEO kind of interweave more and more, what do you do with this?
I don't know if you've seen, fascinatingly, the TikTok one. There's all the connection to the Chinese government, but then there's a law case at the moment out in Seattle where some of the schools are trying to take TikTok to court for impacting mental health of students.
Wow.
And they've gone at it from that angle. I would assume it's the same people that are concerned about the Chinese government connections, more so than an actual child protection case. But I think going at it the child protection route is going to get a much quicker response and a much quicker banning. So that's kind of really fascinating to see, actually, that they're going at it from both angles now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our usual stance on this, and I think is still the right stance, is use these platforms tactically to be discovered by audiences and be at the cutting edge and get your brand name in front of them so they recognize you. But do not build your empire there. Build your empire on your domain, on code and content that you own, that isn't going to just have a chance of disappearing tomorrow, unless like something severely terrifying happens with the world. Separate those strategies from the tactical outposts. Manage that separately. Definitely invest in short form video. Definitely invest in social. Don't over invest in specific platforms, I think. Who knows? And on that note, yeah, so part of the reaction to Twitter seems to be a growing audience from Mastodon, which is an open source defederated Twitter competitor. It's a lot more complicated to use than Twitter. It's got a lot smaller audience, but a lot of the tech nerds and a lot of the journalists have already moved over. It'd be interesting to see how that performs against Twitter. Medium moved there recently. I'm not convinced yet, but maybe the days of having like one or two big social media platforms are gone. Maybe now we have a fragmented ecosystem, and your marketing strategy needs to be lots of little things in little places for the right audiences, rather than just share it on Facebook. You're Mastodon?
I'm not. This is really heinous to say. I just bloody hate all social media. Is that awful to admit? And
no, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, new technology for me, like, it's interesting, but I don't think any of this stuff is here to stay in terms of like Mastodon. Like, I just don't think the usability is there. I think they will penetrate a very niche audience and stay with that. And then you'll get a new platform on another audience and so on. And actually, that I think makes it much harder for us as marketers, and then also just as a human perspective to know where you want to spend your time.
Yep.
But yeah, I can't imagine us having the likes of these big platforms ever again.
No, agreed. But then I guess conversely, Twitter's big failing, depending on whose opinion you like, was that it didn't gain enough critical mass, and it didn't work out how it was going to monetize effectively. And it still achieved neither of those. So if we now get a smaller, harder to use version of it, it's definitely not going to cross those thresholds. And the smaller and more kind of bitty these platforms are, the harder they're going to find it. So it'd be interesting to watch all of this fall apart.
I also think it really undermines their whole, their whole thing is we're free because we're here for the community. And like Mastodon's very much like that. I think that's why it fits so well with Medium. The second you start trying to monetize this completely, you're going to end up undermining the premise of the business. And then in doing that, you end up pissing people off. Sorry for my language. Don't know if that's allowed on a Yoast webinar. Just assume so. Everyone will be annoyed, and then they'll leave the platform, and then you're back down to the small audience. The same as with Twitter. The more they monetize, the more people hate it. I mean, plus some Elon stuff. But ultimately, it's not going to work.
Okay, so check out what the kids are doing and move with the flow.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, some broader industry and tech news. This is interesting. So we talk about it occasionally. There is an SEO rank tracking and analysis platform called Systrix, which we're good friends with, both of us, in fact, that's nice, who publish a lot of really interesting research. This one was recent. This was the industry winners in the US for 2022, which domains grew the most, like proportionally and absolutely. And the actual individual domains aren't necessarily that interesting, but there was a really interesting trend behind this, which was the sites that won were the ones who produced original content, who did original research, who owned the factual information, or where they added and created value, or where they're the very last click in a user's journey. So all the sites that are just creating content and adding pages in that kind of middle really struggle. But the sites which are the original sources of information, or the sites which are the final destination where you go to take action, do really, really well. I think that's fascinating. Like, though, this is again aligns with the kind of Google wants to solve your problems. Google wants to get you there directly. It isn't about which page has the most words about this keyword. It's about understanding the user problem. And that is either trusting the source of that information or being able to act upon it. That's really powerful. Also, I think just yesterday or the day before, they released one about the UK retail brand winners and losers, which was equally interesting. they had a whole bunch of analysis looking at big brands that had overreached. Like if your e-commerce site sells 100,000 products, how are you going to make all 100,000 of those pages really good and really valuable? And actually the sites which did really well are the ones who sell 10 or 100 products, and they invest in quality and getting those pages really, really right. So there's some learnings to be had there about not overreaching, which I thought was useful. Also good, we bring this up occasionally. There is an SEO agency in the UK called Era, who we're good friends with. They produce a bunch of research around the state of the link building and the state of technical SEO. Tech SEO one came out recently, and a whole bunch of you people and others said that you couldn't live without Yoast SEO, which is really nice. I think this is super useful because if there are names in that chart that you're not familiar with as tools, go check them out. These are all really great ways to understand how you're doing, how your site's running, and to take ownership of some of that data and take action. We're good friends with SEMrush, for example. They have a nice integration into Yoast SEO where you can check your ranking stuff, and a bunch of these other kits are good as well. Actually, Bing Webmaster Tools, right? Really good. Surprising.
Yeah, do you use that?
I've logged into it occasionally.
So that's a no. Yeah, I was really shocked to see that one come up. I can't say it's something we use often either. I think Screaming Frog I would just also obviously flag there as a great tool in terms of the log file analyzer specifically, being a really good one to see popping up in this chart. I'd say a year ago, people weren't really bothered about their log file analysis. It was less mainstream. It's nice to see it becoming more technical.
Yeah, if you've got weird SEO stuff going on and you're struggling to diagnose it, really getting actual data on how and when and where does Google access my site and crawl pages can reveal all sorts of interesting technical SEO issues, like redirect loops and dead ends and stuff. So if you want to get really hands-on, Screaming Frog is a great way to kind of get the raw data about all of your site stuff. Very nice. And then, not lastly in this section, last but one in this section, Apple announced a thing. I'm not an Apple person, I'm an Android person, so I'm going to let you talk about this.
That's great. So I will be honest, I assumed that Apple Business Connect was just based off Google My Business, and why on earth would they have a separate thing? And then, not to anecdotally take advice from the younger team members I have, all of my team at work who are in their kind of early 20s passionately have feelings about whether you use Apple Maps or Google Maps. I didn't really notice there was a difference, but they actually seem to think that one is more reliable. They laughed when I said I use Apple Maps. They were like, but it's completely unreliable. The data's never right in it. So clearly it's a problem that people are aware of. And maybe one of those kind of follow the kids things again, that actually having this up to date and having all the data in place is really important. And it shows Apple kind of stepping up to really take on Google.
Yeah, and for so many years now, we've been sat expecting Apple to make a big play on search and to launch something competitive to Google. And they always seem to be sort of on the verge of it. Maybe this is them shoring up some more of that proposition. That'd be fascinating. I also think this is a data source for Google, could be quite powerful. If you've got problems with your knowledge graph and Google getting the wrong address or postcode for your business, having that correct in Apple too might help to reinforce that and standardize it. So it's definitely worth spending the 30 minutes it'll take to set this up if you've got a business that does anything kind of retail-y or in person. Nice. Okay, the big news of the week, the big news, which I think is super interesting, is the entire source code for Yandex got leaked. And Yandex, like not just the search engine bit, but like all of their stuff. But obviously the search engine stuff is what we're interested in. And within that leak was all of the information about how all of their ranking factors work. Like quite technical and quite hard, not written in a way that you can just go analyze it, but people are now digging and exploring, and there's some really fascinating stuff around the types of things that Yandex analyze and how important they might be relatively. I think this is really interesting for a few reasons. One is that there are lots of ex-Googlers who work at Yandex. Yandex was built as a Google clone, essentially. It was, how do we get this in a different part of the world and solve the same kind of problems? But more interestingly, I think one of the best ways to think about SEO and to work out, am I crazy, am I doing this right, is to say, how would I rank websites if I was a search engine? And then you start asking questions like, how do I deal with spam? How do I value links? How do I treat queries for different sectors? Are recipes the same as renting a car? Probably not. And what we have here is a huge version of that thought experiment. We have the ability to look and see, how does somebody solve this at scale? I think that's fascinating. Practically, this isn't going to change your SEO strategy, but I think we can learn a lot about how to think about search engines, information retrieval, what kinds of things might matter, what might not, what might be becoming more important or less important. I'm really obsessed by this. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome bit of insight, but also we're really warning clients not to get too obsessed with the code leak and everything there, because I think, like as Jono said, it shouldn't drastically change what you were doing. Like, if you weren't naturally factoring in some of this stuff, you probably weren't doing SEO very well. I don't think there were any like glaring surprises in it, to be perfectly honest. When we talk about SEO, we always talk about, I think it was a quote from either Gary or John a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, about baby algorithms. Like, each one of those questions that John has just asked, like around the different sectors and so on, are one of Google's baby algorithms. And then they all factor together to create the bigger algorithm. And all Yandex has done here is really let us see what some of those baby ones were. Like, they're contributing factors, but they're not the be all and end all, and they should be covered off. I think the most interesting bit in that kind of seems to have slipped through was the point on, they talk about using data that should be only accessible in things like Google Analytics, like your site's bounce rate, for example, within the algorithm. And I guess if that's mimicked from Google, Google should not be cross-sharing data from its analytics platform back into data from the search engine. So depending on how they're processing that data, I might think we see some more antitrust things come up, kind of tying back to all the legal cases against Google. That could
it's going to give people something to look for, isn't it? Now they're going to be looking for comparable stuff. Conversely, there was a whole bunch of stuff in here that suggested that Yandex was crawling Google and TikTok as a kind of validation process. So it's all intertwined anyway. It's fascinating. But yeah, like all of these, there's like 17,000 different ranking factors or some huge amount, but they all bubble up to like have great content and solve user problems and have strong technical foundations and build a reputable brand. Like none of this is paradigm changing, but fascinating to learn from. Okay, some Yoast news, because everybody loves Yoast news. If you haven't yet updated to Yoast SEO 20.0, you should, because this is a thing. This is our brand new settings UI. We have torn up the rulebook and rebuilt a big chunk of the plugin from scratch so that it is super modern and super awesome and super pretty and super performant and slightly controversial. We've moved away from WordPress's native look and feel, which is a bit dated and quite constraining. Like, there's no way we could have done this within WordPress's native design capabilities and admin stuff. So we've built our own thing. We're really proud of it. It's really awesome. It's much easier to find and surface settings, to understand what you're doing. All of the little bells and toggles and stuff are much better described. It's much easier to go in and tinker with stuff. It's a great excuse to go through and make sure that you have all of the right things configured for your website, and go through every single one of these, check that everything makes sense. But yeah, we're really proud of this. It's really cool. It's the first step in a whole bunch of other stuff we're going to be overhauling. But yeah, version 20, go check it out. Very nice. And if you would like to tell us how awesome it is in person, maybe we might see you in Bangkok in 2 weeks. We're at WordCamp Asia, which is the first time we've had a big WordCamp in that part of the world. It's going to be a few thousand people there who are all WordPress nerds and hosting companies and plugin people and all sorts of cool stuff. There'll be lots of good stuff to learn and lots of good parties and lots of fun. Yeah, come hang out, come see the Yoast booth. We will have lots of purple things, I expect, and lots of SEO stuff. Very cool. And then, yeah, we talked about this earlier, and maybe we also see you in May at YoastCon. So a lot of Yoast stuff, but there's so much cool stuff going on. Look, a big green button has just appeared on the bottom of the screen about buying tickets. Seriously, though, it's going to be really cool. It's a one-day event in Nijmegen. There's all sorts of cool stuff. People like Hannah Thorpe, who you're probably bored of by now, but in a couple of months, you might be able to tolerate some more. Definitely turn up for that. And then just before we get onto discussion and Q&A, worth noting that we do lots of these. We do one of these a month. Next month, at the end of February, we will have Alex Moss on, who we both know very well. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of Web 3.0 and crypto stuff. Not because I'm recommending that you buy Bitcoin, but because it is a thing and it's quite interesting, and it might change things about how the web works and how SEO works, and decentralized stuff like Mastodon are quite interesting strategically. So we'll explore some of that. Okay, right. Hannah.
Yes, Jono.
How do I stop sharing my screen?
I don't know, because you've not shared it with me the whole time. So.
Wow. There we go. Okay.
Hi.
Would you like to talk about SEO strategy and research?
I'd love to.
Excellent. So, an opening question then. I think we did a session about SEO strategy a couple of months ago on this, maybe even the one we did with Nicholas Stott, our good friend. And we talked about how important it is to have an SEO strategy and to do competitive differentiation, etc. What we didn't talk about was what are the ingredients to do that, and what are the inputs. And in particular, if we're saying that it's really important that you solve user problems, what are those problems? Who are those users? How do you find out? How do you validate your theories? Where do you get the data? How do you evolve that over time? What do you do?
Cool. I mean, we could definitely talk about that for another hour. But to keep the answer short, I guess there's kind of two data sources that I thought would be worth talking about that can really contribute well to an SEO strategy. The first one is a UK-specific tool that's called YouGov. I believe that you also have it across bits of the US and across Europe for some markets. What YouGov does is it creates a lot of audience research, like publicly available. So you can build kind of profiles of what your audience might be like, what they'd be into, what they're doing. I think that's really interesting because whilst your brand might not be on YouGov, one of the things that we like to do is take the associated brands. So we work for a very lovely interior design company, and pretty much all of their customers shop at Waitrose, which is quite a fancy supermarket in the UK. And so for them, we would look at the user profile of an average Waitrose shopper and apply that into our audience research. It saves us thousands in having to do our own research and gives you quite a nice data output very quickly. And you can kind of cross-combine brands and be like, if they shop at Waitrose and they also own their own car, they have these things in common, and start to narrow down your audience set and build your own personas. The other thing we really recommend doing is focusing on things that are actually in the SERP. So Google is so good now at knowing what the user's looking for. I think it's a really missed audience point that someone earlier said something about when they search development resources, like if you're searching for a development resource, you normally want like a step-by-step or a community answer where people are solving the problem and talking. And you would know that by searching for the resource and seeing the types of results that rank. So we use a tool called SERP Sketch, and that analyzes the types of results that are appearing on the first page. It looks at if there's lots of paid ads, lots of shopping ads. It looks at if there's lots of images, for instance, or YouTube's owning a big space. And that helps you to understand the experience that your audience would be looking for. Like if they were looking for those terms, what did they expect? And can you fulfill that, or should somebody else be fulfilling that?
Nice. And I guess if you come to the conclusion that you're not the right person to fulfill it, it's going to be really hard to rank. But you could change. You could alter your proposition, alter your inventory, if you're small and agile enough, you can tweak how you behave to fit that. But fighting against that is going to be super hard, right?
Yeah, or you find people to build partnerships with, and you say, okay, so we're not the right people to rank for this. So we worked with a watch company and we said, you're never going to rank for these terms. Like thinking you're going to rank for best watch or best gift for a man, like that's not going to happen because you only sell your product. But using that in-SERP analysis is going to enable you to see the types of sites that are ranking, and then actually say, you know what, why don't we just build a paid partnership with the person that ranks first? And then if we do that, we absolutely don't need to try and rank for it because we'll be the top of their result when they get the click. And it's just a nice way of skirting around SEO.
Nice. That's cool. The other thing I wanted to think about was how do you how do you leverage like more traditional research and data processes and combine those with an SEO strategy? Things like surveying, user analysis, etc.
So our ideal is to end up with what we call an empathy map for every kind of user group that we have. If you are someone that normally does like UX or web design, you probably have used empathy maps to build your site structures. But I think they're really important from a perspective of actually working out what data you're putting together to build those personas. And then we build our strategies. Sorry, I'm using all the acronyms and buzzwords today. But we use our strategies. We do this thing called a VMOST. That stands for vision, mission, objective, strategy, and tactics. So you might start with your overall vision, which would be like, I want to be the best SEO agency in the UK. And then you might say, in order to achieve that, there's 3 missions I need to undertake. And that might be to resonate with potential job candidates by actually showing that we're the best and we're nurturing, we have that culture. One mission might be to focus on attracting new business, and one mission might be to focus on retaining existing business. And then you can start to segment your data into how does it help you achieve those missions that will get you to that overall vision. And then from that, you can set some clear KPIs, build that into a strategic direction, and then pick those little underlying tactics, like we're going to churn out content with ChatGPT, can be a tactic that sits under one of them, but it's not the whole of your strategy. That enables you to own all of the assets as part of your strategy very well. You're not reliant on a social platform imploding or anything. But then also what's great about it is that it allows you to work out where your data piece is in. So if you've got loads and loads of offline data and traditional data, you can work out which bit it applies to and start to tie it in and have those different data channels feeding in, rather than this just overwhelming amount of spreadsheets and pretty PDFs of data that you don't know what to do with.
Nice, makes sense. And the other component to this, I think one last bit before we do some Q&A, was all of this is quite in isolation. It's very much, what do I want to do? How do you analyze what your competitors are doing and maybe spot gaps and strengths and weaknesses?
So we would say, when you're analyzing your competitors, start with if their business is actually growing, whether that's looking on Companies House if you're in the UK, or whether it's actually just reading kind of industry trend reports, because a lot of people have a tendency to duplicate what the big competitor that's in their head does, but maybe doesn't realize that actually they're struggling in terms of digital. You look at some of the horrendous retail horror stories we have in the UK of large brands taking over a company or buying it and then deciding to just like delete the whole website. If you copied that, you would struggle. And then I think from a competitor perspective, it's really about making sure you benchmark against the people that are appearing in the SERP, not just who you think are actual competitors. You've got brand mission competitors, but you've also got like, actually, who are they seeing? And is a competitor just an alternative solution, like completely different to what you do, but the route they could have gone down instead of purchase from anyone?
Nice. Yeah, like we're a really good example for that. Our competitor in some places is Wikipedia, because we're providing educational content. Our competitor in some cases is Moz, who are a SEO rank tracking platform, which isn't something we really directly provide. They're not an SEO plugin for your WordPress site, but they do kind of occupy the same space. So we've got to do a bit of thinking about how do we want to think about who we're competing against. And we probably shouldn't outrank Wikipedia, but maybe we should for Moz for some types of queries, and we should be really clear on where those lines are.
And I think for Yoast as well, like a competitor is just not using anything. Like if you are so overwhelmed when you've built your site that you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do for SEO, and you just run and hide, that's a competitor to Yoast, which is why things like the Yoast Academy, making it so accessible, is so important, because you're tackling off that early audience group who the competition is just choice paralysis and cry in the corner.
Nice. That's me. Awesome. Well, let's do some Q&A. Thank you very much for that. Oh, there's Nick about that. Was really interesting. Thank you. I haven't seen if I had any questions. We changed the webinar thing recently and they're hidden.
We did get some questions. Thanks, by the way, Hannah and Jono, for this great webinar. It was really interesting. And I think one topic that really stuck to our audience was ChatGPT.
Oh, no.
So most of the questions are, about ChatGPT. And we have some WordPress questions and a regular Google question, but let's get the first most upvoted question out of the way: copyright and GPT. There's another question as well about like how can ChatGPT or AI use your content as an original source while presenting it to other people. So this is all a little bit related regarding copyright, using other content to create new content. So what are the thoughts on that?
I guess just before we do anything, we should say we are not lawyers. This is not legal advice. And that also, there isn't really an answer to this question yet. There is a lot of debate and a lot of discussion and a lot of philosophy. And I don't think we'll get an answer fast. That said, there are some quite specific lawsuits happening at the moment with Diffusion AI, which is the platform behind Stable Diffusion, the image generator. They are alleged to, very careful, they are alleged to have used Getty's stock images in their training set. Getty are not happy about this. Whether or not that's true almost isn't relevant. The point is that these systems deconstruct existing images and reconstruct them in different ways. And is that art or is that theft? It's a very big question. Nobody knows. Nobody will know for a while. We might find some specific people get a slap on the wrist, but this is huge and open-ended.
And the other way around. So if you would be using AI-created images or copy, would you think you should be mentioning this as a resource?
So I can't tell if Jono's talking or frozen. I'm going to talk over him. Sorry. Okay, great. Yeah, so I would say that realistically, if you're using like AI generated content, the onus is still on you. Like that's the advice we give to our clients. Like from a legal perspective, it's still up to you to make sure that A, it's factually true, and B, that it's not directly stolen. Obviously, ChatGPT like shows some great stats around the fact the content's completely unique and they're not breaching copyright and they're just repurposing fact basically. But it is your job and you are the one publishing it to make sure that it's unique. I think there's been some really examples of people that do disclose that their content's written by AI. And I don't think that puts off people from reading it. It doesn't stop search engines ranking it. So my non-qualified legal advice would be to label things up for now, because you are covering your back, even if you're only covering your back for the fact that if a law case comes out that you're not allowed to use it, you know which content you need to remove very quickly before you get sued too.
Yeah.
So I would do it from that perspective. I think the other question that's around like, how do you feel about people using it as a source and almost having your unique thought and your unique images stolen is really interesting. Like what I say to my clients is like, you can't own a fact. So if you're giving factually the best answer and there's not any kind of brand perspective on it, then yes, they might be using you as the source or taking content from you, but you're actually helping the user in the end. So how much really, where's the limit of what a brand owns? And I think like if you took Yoast as the example, it's beneficial for Yoast as a platform for people to understand SEO better, because then they will understand better how great Yoast is as a tool, because they'll know how to use it and get the most out of it. So is it a problem for you if they think that knowledge came from ChatGPT and then they went, oh, that's great, here's Yoast the solution? Or is it a problem? Like it shouldn't be. If you've got a great solution and it solves a problem, you should be more than happy for them to have the information.
Cool. Thanks for answering that. I think that's really valuable for everybody joining the webinar. Okay, so you already touched base on any idea how we can do SEO for ChatGPT, so how to drive traffic. I think you already gave an idea, like make sure you are the solution to the problems people are searching answers for. Would you have any other specific SEO advice regarding AI, ChatGPT, other answers, other examples?
From my perspective at the moment, I don't think anyone actually knows. And I think if anyone's giving you answers on that, it's completely untested. which is a scary place to be in, because ChatGPT isn't crediting where it's getting the results from, and you shouldn't be trying to manipulate it to get something appear that isn't right. Like, you can't guarantee. Like, I know the way that some of the tech behind Google's kind of knowledge graph and how that works is about having multiple of the same references. So I think that at one point they were banding around between 30 and 60 of the same points, made it them consider it fact from reputable sources. So actually, you probably can't game it to make sure it's you that gets people sent to it, because everything is being checked against one another to ensure that they're giving users what they believe to be the right answer.
Cool. Okay. Let's move on to another. Let's see if I have to answer another question.
Whilst you're looking, one thought.
Yeah.
Interestingly, there is discussion around an emerging standard for opting out of your content being used in training sets via meta robots. So you would have something like a no index or no follow meta tag, and you would say no source scraping or something. It's very early, and I don't imagine it getting much adoption, but there may be mechanisms to opt out in the future. Maybe.
Okay. That's a good one. Maybe a WordPress question for now. We have a question from John. And the question is, any thoughts on how the evolution of Gutenberg and blocks will impact popular builders like Divi?
Yes. So we are still waiting with the hopes and the dreams that rather than every one of these page builder solutions building its own mechanisms and page construction systems, that they all gradually use Gutenberg and blocks as the backend and the architecture, and what differentiates them is their user interfaces and their systems and the way you interact with them. It's not ready yet, but I think Gutenberg and the block editor isn't far off the point where it could just become the universal backend for all of these, which will make them all more interoperable, make everything more powerful, everything faster, everything better. But yeah, maybe in a couple of years.
We're almost out of time, but since we started a little bit late, we'll do one more question. We have a few ChatGPT questions, just a regular main comments. In the chat, people are sharing all kinds of good resources, and
nice.
Definitely save those for later if you're watching this and want to deep dive into that as well. We have one question from John as well. It's about Google showing all the results near the top while he is searching for development methods that are always evolving. So I assume he would like more recent result to show. And you were covering Yandex, and if Yandex is actually focusing on age of the link, does that lead to more dated results as well? Doesn't that lead to dated results as well? So do we think the age of the link is an important, of course, fresh content is important, but does the age of the link matter in that perspective?
So we work off the theory that one of those bits of the algorithm, like the baby algorithms within the main one, is query deserves freshness, which we all know is sometimes a factor, but the value of how much query deserves freshness is applied on the query will depend on what it was. So if you were searching for like restaurants during COVID, what you saw was much more recent stuff ranked a lot higher. And that was because things were changing, whether they were open or closed, news updates were coming out, query deserves freshness became much more important. What I would imagine is happening with the links and Yandex caring about the date is that Yandex is probably saying, if on the search, the query doesn't deserve freshness and it doesn't matter because it's kind of an evergreen query, the value of the link is related to how old it is. But then they're probably doing the inverse as well. On something where the query does deserve freshness and that's triggered, a newer link probably has more weighting. Because I think that's the bit that hasn't really been unveiled as to how that would interact with the deserving freshness part. So it's a metric they're looking at, but don't take it as fact. That means it's more important than another metric on every query.
Nice, thanks. Okay, I think we're done. a lot of questions about ChatGPT, a lot of stuff to look into as well, I guess, for our audience, a lot of ideas and fast developing topics. Hannah, first I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it was really fun.
You're more than welcome, and we're super excited to see you on stage in May, of course, for YoastCon, and one sneak preview for the next webinar. Jono will be joined by Alex Moss by the time. It will be in February. You can sign up through the link you see in the green button below. And that was it. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks, and
thank you, everyone. That was lovely.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.